Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not So Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Snowpiercer. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Shitstorm of many different things going wrong. I like the whole thing that Austin, kind of says in the intro, just kind of like, what was it, like, trouble comes sideways or something like that. I thought was kind of interesting. Like, always keep your eyes on swivel. Like, always kind of be on the lookout because it will always come from the sidelines when stuff kind of hits you, and just like the domino effect of things. It's just like all you can do is just watch everything kind of come down like a straight line type. It was an interesting thing to hear. But obviously there was an issue with the train. In particular, it was like the motor to like one of the brakes or whatever. And so obviously that has to be dealt with. At the same time, there's like Third planning on going on strike, and Melanie has to be the one that kind of has to nip that in the bud right now, And obviously it's so interesting because we saw a side of Ruth where Ruth was kind of like, yeah, Mr. Wilford is back, came to his senses for this one day, but it's like because she kind of blames Wilford for everything kind of transpiring to what it is now. It's like because you listened to them, because Mr. Wilford listened to them last episode, tried to, put like the whole listening to them, the whole putting a third on the tribunal and stuff like that, So it is a situation of like, she feels like, it's like, yeah, he's in his senses now, but who's to say this is going to last forever? So it's just kind of, and once again, just like her mentality of just like looking down on like almost treating Third like they're like, is like almost, she's almost like these people. It's just like that, like classism to it. It was just, I mean, it's always been there. It's not like it's been hidden or whatever, or subtle or anything. It was just interesting to see in that moment, her talking like that. But obviously, Melanie calms her down. It's just kind of like, we're part of hospitality, so we need to kind of reel that back in. So nevertheless, there's that. There's the whole conversation between Zara and Andre, because obviously Andre is not in his right mind, and it lends itself to this whole conversation because basically he's blaming her because it's like, you're the one that gave them my name. I didn't want to be out of the tail. You pulled me out of the tail. It's like you kind of abandoned everything that we are, like in the tail. You left that behind. You left me behind, and it's also like now you ended up dragging me into all of this mess. He's like, you should have stayed clean. Maybe other people got that specifically. I feel like that could be interpreted multiple ways. One, as in you should have stayed clean, as in you should have, like, the fact of the matter is you're part of this, you're part of Third now, so like you're not clean anymore in the sense of like the tail, like you've cut your allegiances to it, so you're no longer clean. Or is that supposed to represent like she was a part of that group, the cannibals and stuff like that? Was she a part of it? Did she like, maybe it's like the moment, like maybe she was one of, because I can't remember last episode because it probably popped up last episode, but like, was she one of the people that ate? Like, once again, what Andre said, it's like none of us can walk away saying we're innocent. So could that be like she ate too, and because of that, she's never been looked like, he couldn't look at her the same, she couldn't look at him. That's what I'm wondering, like, because they're probably the only ones that were involved in that, potentially in a relationship. That's what I'm curious about. Like I said, I can't remember if they showed her in those flashbacks last episode or not. So like I said, that's why I just feel like I'm completely missing the ball on that. Like someone else could probably be like, no, it clearly meant this. I feel like I just completely misinterpreted that, but it was just an interesting situation. Even to the point he was like, are you going to turn me in? And she's like, no, like, it's because it's almost sad, because it's almost like you have such a low opinion of me, because she was almost like, what did you do? Like, why would you put in the drawers and stuff like that? And the fact of the matter is, I think it speaks volumes that he didn't tell her what he ended up telling Josie, because he was like, Josie, if something ever happens to me, you need to know the truth. Melanie's the one behind the curtain. So the fact of the matter, it's like, and don't tell anyone else, because we need to find out later on whether this is something we could use as leverage, like how to properly take advantage of this information that no one else knows, because the other few people outside of that inner circle that know are dead. So it also turns out the doctor, she's working with them, and it turns out, like, the reason why she's helping, though, is because it turns out, like, because she says, like, the only time she gets involved in all of this is the whole situation when it comes to people that were in the drawers, because obviously they come up a little, messed up in the head, a little agitated. Obviously, we see that with Andre. But what's interesting is she says, like, the information is, for one, that's not the only drawers. She's actually got, like, there's 11 other cars filled with drawers, hundreds of them. So it's like, whoa. So it's like, for what purpose? And obviously, like, she doesn't know, but she's guessing like maybe it's just kind of supposed to be her own little experiment. Like she wasn't really 100% sure what this whole thing was about. But she puts up like files on everybody, and certain people have an X, and she feels like those were designated people of like, because Josie's on the list, so is Andre. And so it's a situation of kind of like these people are on a blacklist. So that's what she was kind of, aiming at. So, and obviously Andre, kind of still kind of agitated and just driven by his need to like, well, the fact of the matter is the whole situation we're trying to fix the train like gets worse, because what ends up happening is like things they're trying to like replace the motor and stuff like that, but like hydraulics and stuff like that mess up, so they need to fix it, because where they're about to hit a turn on the train starts rocking, and then everybody feels it. And in fact, heavily, because I think they said like it's like 700 or something, like the car that like all this goes down in. So literally the back less than 300, it's like probably like 270 or something. I mean, granted, it doing that will probably derail the rest of the train too. So it's not just going to mess up the back chunk. It's going to mess up the entire train. But the fact of the matter is, like, it sends everybody flying, and so it's a situation of like this is a desperate situation. Even Ruth getting over the intercom saying like, she's trying to keep people, I guess, because kind of trying to do her thing is hospitality, trying to keep people calm by being like, the fact of the matter is the engine provides, so trust that everything's going to work out in the end, because she's like, I believe it will work out in the end. So at the same time, there's a whole like Oz situation, like he's blackmailing Bess with the whole situation, kind of like, oh, like it turns out I'm not the only one that's corrupt, so are you. So the fact of the matter is, he's like, I'm going to take everything I can from the situation, take advantage of it as much as I can. So it's like he crosses the line and he kind of forces Bess, like, it's like, oh, you're trying to pump people for information. It's like, okay, because it turns out the person that was handing out the flyers, the person who came to the paper dude for supplies was Clay. He's, Audrey's like right hand. So they kind of find out about that, and Oz kind of pushes the boundaries of like how far you should go, and Bess kind of had to go along with the flow. Obviously she can't be there with Jinju, because even Jinju was like, yeah, like she hasn't seen Bess for a little while, and it's just like I haven't heard anything from her. So it's like, they're moving in together and everything. So at the same time, there was also that thing, I'm doing this completely out of order, so I do apologize, but there was also the interesting thing about like that Melanie kind of presented to Third, where she was basically if you don't shut this whole strike down, the fact of the matter is 10 of you are going to be chosen from random and then sent to the tail, and then 10 people from the tail will be brought up to Third to fill your role. So it's like there are 400 souls, which also I think this is the first time they've ever actually given us a number of how many people live in the tail. So like it's saying roughly about 400. So it's like, you think things are rough in Third, what about the 400 souls in the tail? So it's interesting that it's almost like in this moment, it almost feels like you concern yourself about them, they're the non-ticketers and all that. Because she tried to say, like, the fact of the matter is you got up here with a ticket, but the fact of the matter is that ticket came with the whole aspect of, yes, you will have to pay back in your doing work. The fact of the matter is, it's kind of like, that's kind of the quid pro quo type of situation that we have going on here. You work for your labor keeps the train going, as kind of almost like basically the price of your ticket, so that was kind of the arrangement before you got on this train. You kind of knew what the deal was, but obviously for them, it's like, once again, they want to be heard, because that whole trial with LJ was like a shamble and everything. So there's all of that. There's even this conversation between Zara and Audrey, and we end up seeing that she's touching her stomach, which you're like, oh, she's pregnant. So it's like, is that why she kind of reacted the way she did towards Andre? Because it's like, is that because I guess she didn't really have an opportunity to tell him? Is she going to tell him? Is it someone else? Like, is it, well, because she's part of her little, they're called chains, right? She has her, but it's like, but I mean, at least within the confines of the show, the last person we saw her with was Andre. So that might turn into, I don't know what that's going to look like going forward, that whole situation. Like, is she going to tell him or not? we'll ultimately have to see. I'm curious to see what that's also going to do between him and Josie, because obviously they got closer this episode. They've always been close, but I think it's just always been something, they've always been on a cusp of like a thing between them, but just it never did. Or maybe it has. The way he made it sound with Zara, like in the beginning, it made it seem like nothing between him and Josie ever happened. Like I said, it was there, but it just never happened until now. But regardless, so Andre ends up tracking down Melanie, because for him it's like, I need to do this. This could be my only chance to do this. And he confronts her about the she's like, you got it all wrong. And he's like, yeah, they're like, you got all these prisons and stuff like that. Some of my people are in there. She's like, they're not prisons, they're lifeboats. Because for her, it's like this whole little human experiment could fall apart just from mold alone. So she wanted an experiment that could put people in stasis, because like this whole thing isn't 100% sustainable. So for her, it's like a select group of people have been chosen to basically take the lifeboat. This is the I'm about to say that weird. I was about to say the Titanic. This is a Titanic situation. And he's like, but why would, and who gives you the right to kind of choose? And he was like, you were all chosen the moment we left people behind to get on this train. So I was like, that's so interesting, because it's a situation of like specific people were chosen. It's like, even though he's in the tail and stuff like that, him and Josie were chosen just because of maybe it has to relate with who they were beforehand, or maybe it's just the fact of the matter is that it's basically like people that needed survive. Like, it's kind of very similar to like the 100 in the same regard, where it's just kind of like they've had to make that decision multiple times throughout the series of like having to sacrifice people so that others can survive, so that humanity can keep going. It's happened multiple times. Obviously, the most recent example was back in season 4. That whole thing, eventually the whole one crew situation, tangents and all that. But it's just like, these people need to survive. They're the ones that's going to kind of keep the humanity alive. And it's interesting too, because for one, it's like this thing that was supposed to be humanity's lifeboat turns out to be the first line of lifeboats, and there's actually a lifeboat to the lifeboat. I think it's just kind of interesting. But nevertheless, there's also that thing between Bennett and Javi, I think, is interesting, because obviously it's like Javi's pissed because it's like the moment Melanie took over this, like she was supposed to like keep the rules like a certain way, but she constantly kind of breaks them. And it's like the whole like her and Bennett situation, and Bennett's like, Javi, like, you need to get a girlfriend. It's been 7 years, you need to get a girlfriend. He's like, yeah, and that'd just be another person I'd have to lie to, because you could never tell them the truth about your whole situation. You'd always have to be lying. Like, that's kind of no way to live. But when it's all said and done, luckily, Melanie is able to fix the train. Andre ran back to Josie, because for him it's like, at that moment, all he could care about, like, this could be the end, and all he could think about was Josie. He wanted to be with her. So obviously there's the whole Oz and Beth situation, where she's just kind of like, who are you thinking about in the end? And he was like, nobody but myself, because she's like, obviously you're a dick. She's like, yeah, I did this whole thing, and you might, but I'm not going to let you kind of blackmail me or kind of control me, like, But when it is all said and done, Oz says like, oh, I'm not going to tell, like whether I tell someone or not, what you did is eventually going to come out, but he's like, yeah, go be with your girl. So it's like, oh, being less of a dick. And he even says like the person he was thinking about was his mom. It's like, oh, how was she a good person? He was like, nah, she was a mean drunk, even worse sober. But yeah, that's who he was thinking about, so. It was even interesting because even in that moment when they, hold on to that person that was nearby, and they both are holding on to each other. So everyone kind of had someone to hold on to. And I think maybe this speaks volumes. I didn't think about it too much until just now, but it's like, notice that LJ was kind of alone. I mean, granted, like her, like that thing was like getting close to the table and she just kind of pushes it off, which I think that's a whole thing in itself. But like, notice her family wasn't there with her. It's not like, oh, we were huddled together. It's like she was kind of on her own, which begs the question, like, well, where the hell were her parents during that? Part of me is like, because like part of me is thinking like, you don't think she, like, I just always had this inkling, like, you don't think she's going to end up killing her parents or something like that, do you? I don't know. Or has she already? Or was that what was that supposed to signify? Maybe it's just kind of like, I mean, it seems like that could be a large metaphor for her herself, in the sense that, like, oh, like when that during a shitty situation like that, she was all alone. She had no one. that's just what was kind of floating through my mind. But like I said, luckily Melanie came through and she ended up, saving the day. She ended up fixing the train, luckily, right before they ended up in that spot where they were going to need to turn. There's also an interesting situation in the tale. Obviously, that boy, like, his mom died, and he has to be there kind of for his sister. And obviously, they can't really do anything about the body, because if they bring the body back there, that means, like, someone's going to have to, like, I think it's, like, sanitation or whatever's going to have to show up. But with the whole thing with Josie, like, they don't, so they can't even give their mom a proper, like, burial or whatever type of situation or memorial, because it would draw attention, like, oh, someone died back here, and they'd be kind of up in their business. I think it's my understanding of it. But obviously they those two, like, end up, like, that dude and the lady end up trying to give people something. It's like they haven't had anything in so long, and obviously there are no windows in the tale, so they captured some images and put it on basically a makeshift projector to show them the outside, because none of them have seen it in 7 years, so kind of giving them a window into all of this, like, while everything's going down, so. But like I said, everything kind of ends up working out in the end, even to the point Third ends up celebrating, being like, yay, we're alive. And Bennett kind of gives a speech about, like, you hear, like, touch anything in the train. You feel that is our hum. That is kind of like the heartbeat of the train. So the fact of the matter, it's still going. We're still going. And for Melanie, it worked out, because it's like that strike, all that kind of gets dealt with now, because, like, now Third's kind of like, oh, happy, because it's like, oh, look, it's like, it kind of appeased them. And obviously Melanie's like, oh, look, looks like that strike's over. She's like, yeah, but their grievances are still there. Next time you won't have a life-threatening emergency to kind of pull people's attention away from it, which, I mean, I'm sure you can almost look at that as, that could be a commentary in itself of, like, oh yeah, like, you had your problems, oh, look at this over here just going to distract you, oh, rather than looking at the right hand, look at the left hand, type of thing. Like I said, you could read so much deeper into that, what that can mean, but nevertheless. So that works out for now, but obviously Audrey still hasn't, she's not letting go, because obviously it's almost, because obviously trying to show that, it is about Nikki, but Nikki is just a symptom of something much more, of just like the way Third is treated in comparison to First and Second, so there's that whole situation. But at least I think for now Melanie feels like she has a win, but there's a whole thing with Miles at the end I think is interesting. Like, it seems like she's taking an interest in him, I guess because, like, he's so smart and everything. I'm wondering, is he going to be kind of like the next Javi or Bennett, kind of being, whatever the case may be. She's like, I want you to do something for me, and I'm like, I'm wondering, does it have something to do with Andre, because Andre knows the truth, and I don't know, she's not necessarily going to be about killing him, but it's like, or maybe she, like I said, maybe she's kind of grooming him in the sense of, like, hey, I want you to kind of help me figure something out about the train. No, I'm such an idiot. It just clicked in my head. She needs his help figuring out the drawers. She sees how smart he is, and it's like, oh, she gave him some work. So it's probably a thing of, like, she's probably passed it around to all the children to see if there's anyone there smart enough to figure it out. She saw something in Miles and it's like, wait, you figured something out. So it's got to, because of the extra work she gave him. So it's a thing of, she needs his help to figure out the drawer situation, figure out the lifeboat. And I was like, that's so interesting. Because he even said to himself that he's going to try and keep his eyes out and kind of still be there as part of the fight for the tail. So I'm curious what that kind of looks like going forward, him working with Melanie. Obviously, there's a whole thing of Andre and Josie kind of hiding away the Doc. She kind of gives him a place, because it's like, well, kind of got to keep them hidden. So it's like, what is Andre going to do? It's like, are you going to sneak back to the tail? Is that going to even be possible? Like, how are they going to handle this whole situation? What's your next move in all of this? And then there's also the whole thing with Bess and Jinju. It's like, oh yeah, like, Bess made her way there, and she's like, I'm not, Bess is like, I'm not the person who thought I was. Jinju's like, oh, there's something there. Like, what is it? And she's like, it's not. I'm just glad to be here. And it's like, so they're both keeping secrets from each other at this point in time, and obviously Jinju knows Bess is keeping something a secret. But like I said, eventually it's going to come out about, because eventually they're going to find out that Andre's free, but it's like, will Melanie say anything? I don't know, especially now that Andre knows what he knows. Like, she might not want to do anything because he could blurt something. I don't know. Obviously she's taking an interest in him, or rather, like, he's a part of, like, that quote unquote well, I was about to say blacklist, but lifeboat. So it's like I don't see her necessarily doing anything to him. Regardless, I'm interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us, especially this whole third situation, because it's like, is that done? I know Audrey's not done, but it's like she probably doesn't have necessarily the moves she wants to make, because it's like, well, she's put in this position where like they're just going like the way third is now, like her like upheaval kind of lost a little steam. So whether that's still going to be a thing next episode, we'll kind of have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.